Welcome to Design Chat with Ida Laura. Today is June 18 of the year of 2020. Naya Hospitality and Craft Lighting are sponsoring this Instagram live session. Naya Hospitality is a representation firm who consults professionals specifically in the hospitality and cruise markets. They represent only the most reputable manufacturers to ensure all their projects are completed on time while meeting the exacting standards of their clientele. Based in Miami, Naya Hospitality counsels design firms, purchasing agents, and ownership groups in Florida and across the United States. Naya Hospitality had partnered with Craft Lighting for this collaboration. Craft Lighting is a British-based decorative lighting manufacturer with a passion for design and crafting beautiful luminaires for the hospitality and residential market. They prioritize attention to details, exceptional quality, and fine craftsmanship. Creative design and innovation is at the heart of their identity. Crafting decorative luminaires is an art, and they have refined this over the time, allowing them to transform spaces through stunning designs built to stand the test of time. Ganesh and Camilla, the leaders of this company, bring over 15 years of experience in lighting product, manufacturing, interior design, and product design. Together, they understand the process of product development and the challenges that it brings. Craft Lighting was founded with the goal of overcoming these obstacles and to establish itself as a creative, open, honest, and trustworthy lighting brand. Craft Lighting has experience using low-energy LED technology to help their clients reduce the carbon footprint by vast energy savings. They also emphasize on giving best guest room experience to the users by making the products compatible with the guest room control system used in hospitality market. Ganesh and Bobby sent me the crescent lighting. They sent me this beautiful sample. This is the crescent light. So it's retro, elegant, has brass, it has a curved handle. Here, you can see it here. They take care of the details. So look at the turning on and off. It's very heavy, so it's very durable. I want you to see how the LED light works here, the bottom. This is beautiful. It fits any hospitality environment, residential environment. It is very elegant and sophisticated. So this is just a sample of their products. They have so many. They have a different type of lighting, task lighting, ambient lighting, sconces. So beautiful product, high quality. They think on details. Beautiful. Craft Lighting. Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, Bobby. Beautiful sample. Elements of design. To create spaces that satisfies the functional and aesthetics goals of a problem, interior designers make use of several design elements according to some basic principles. The design elements and principles are the same used by painters, graphic designers, sculptors, and other visual artists. These design elements are form, point, line, plane, volume, scale, color, texture, pattern, and light. Let's begin with form. Form is the basic shape and configuration of an object or a space. It is often the way we first distinguish one thing as being different from another. For example, the form of a chair is different from the form of the wall behind it. There are an infinite number of possible forms, but people most often generalize and describe forms with words such as cylindrical, flat square, or linear. Form gives the interior designer a powerful tool to create order, establish mood, and coordinates the diverse components of a finished space. However, the form of an object or space can be affected by other factors such as light, color, and the other basic elements, as well as by the effects of human perception. A circle seen obliquely becomes an ellipse, for example. Optical illusions may also alter the perceived form of an object. Form or shape is generated with lines, planes, volumes, and to a lesser extent, points. Each has its own characteristics, strengths, and limitations for interior design. The second element is the point. Point. Theoretically, a point, a position with no dimension. Practically, a point is perceived when two-dimensionally perceived objects appears relatively small in relation to the plane against which it is seen. Although points are typically conceived of as very small dots, little dots, a point can be any shape if its dimension is very small in relationship to its background. The perception of points in architecture and interior design depends on the distance. A painting on a wall is in a plane viewed from a few feet away, but becomes a point when it's not a point, but becomes a point when you see it from 100 feet away. Because viewing on the interior of most buildings occurs at a relatively close range, an object that is to be perceived as a point must be a small figure in relation to the ground against which it is placed. A single point creates a location or position. 2 points create both a distance between them and an implied direction between the points, as well as an implied direction between the points perpendicular imaginary line connecting them. Points used in groups can create either a static composition or a dynamic one and energize the plane on which they are placed. The next element, line. A line is an object or form whose actual or visual length greatly exceeds any actual width or depth it might have. Lines are also formed and perceived where one plane meets another, where edges occur, and where there is a change in material, texture, or color. Lines convey a very strong directional sense and can affect a person's feeling about a space. For instance, horizontal lines are generally perceived as restful, stable, and related to the plane of the air, the natural plane of the air. Vertical lines usually connote strength, equilibrium, right? It's vertical, permanence, and a strong upward or downward depending on the slope of the line. Curved lines relate more to the natural world and the human body, right? The human body. They are graceful and suggest gentle movement. Curved lines can either be geometric, like circles, arcs, and ellipses, or free form. Lines can also affect the perception of the space in which they are used. Generally, a vertical line appears longer than a horizontal line of the same length. Various theories have been offered to explain this phenomenon. One of the theories is that vertical lines often represent lines extending away from the observer, so they are being foreshortened and the brain adds length to them, right? So you see the vertical and your brain try to keep that line going up or going down. Another explanation is that seeing horizontally is more natural for humans because the earth is horizontal, we have two eyes aligned. So looking vertical lines requires more effort. Whatever the reason, the effect seems to hold true in many cases. Vertical lines tend to make a space appear higher than it is, while horizontal lines tend to make the space lower than it is. Diagonal lines are the most dynamic and exist in interior design and architecture two different ways. First, they might be actual diagonal lines relative to the vertical horizontal. Second, they always exist in the field of vision because of the way people perceive the vertical and the horizontal lines in a perspective, right, on a distance. Used appropriately, diagonal lines can enliven a space, direct your eyes, and create a sense of movement. Lines can be introduced into a space by using objects with strong linear forms, by structural elements like columns, by applied finished materials, and even with lighting. You could have directional lighting. The designer can use a line as basic design element to create the desired effect in concert with another element. Next, I'll talk about the plane. So plane. A plane is a form with two dominant dimensions, length and width. As with lines, all planes in the real world have some depth, but that dimension is not perceived as much as the dominant dimension. For example, a 3 square footage tabletop with 1 inch thickness appears planar, right? So a tabletop, 1 inch, planar. While the same 3 square footage with 6 inch in the edge appears massive and three-dimensional. Planes are a significant component of interior design because a space is typically defined by planar surfaces such as the wall, the floor, and the ceiling. Even furniture and other objects are usually constructed of planes. Unlike lines, planes help determine the form of a space with an additional characteristic of shape, texture, color, and pattern. Because of these, planes are a major factor in determining the character of a shape. A plane can be treated as a single surface with only one color, one texture, or it can be subdivided like a painting with different individual materials, textures, and colors. The planes use a defined space and can be harmonized or contrasted with the planar forms of furniture, accessories, and other elements. The next element of design is volume. Volume is the true three-dimensional aspect of interior design because an object with volume clearly perceived as spatial for having length, width, and depth. Volume can either be solid or void, sometimes referred to as positive or negative space or figure ground. An object with volume has a definite shape and is usually perceived and categorized as regular or irregular, or by a dominant characteristic. As with other design elements, volume can be employed to enhance the overall effect of a spatial composition. The next design element is shape. Shape is the unique characteristic of an object or space that define it as distinct from adjacent objects or spaces. Shapes are clearly distinguished by planar or volumetric forms and can be geometric, irregular, or natural. Shape can convey powerful symbolic or emotional qualities. The shape of a cross or the outline of an apple, for example, are not just abstract forms but carry definite meaning for some people. That meaning can be vary greatly depending on the culture, the country, the background, and experience of the person viewing the shape. On a more basic level, some shapes tend to have an associative quality that are similar for a large group of people. That is why it's so important that when you are designing, you need to know what is the target user of that space to understand what shapes, what forms you're gonna use in this space. The next design element is a scale. And this is one of my favorite design elements, and I take it in consideration every time I am developing a new project or a design concept. A scale is relative size of something as related to another element of known size. The human scale is the most common scale in which objects and spaces are judged relative to the size and form of the human body, right? Us, the humans, we are the most used scale. This comparison can occur directly or indirectly. For example, the volume of a room can be compared with a person standing in the room, or the same space can be compared with something inanimate that relates to the human, like a chair. There are not definite rules for scale relationships. The judgment of a scale is always complex because of the multitude of objects within a space, the form of the space itself, and the way the perception of objects and spaces is affected by color, value, texture, lighting, repetition, and other factors. A scale can be used to give spaces an intimate feeling, like maybe in a hotel room, or a monumental character, maybe in a music hall. Color, that's the next design element. Color is one of the most dominant perceptions of the physical world and one of the most powerful tools for interior design. One of the most powerful tools. At the same time, color is one of the most complex physical and physiological phenomenon to understand and use correctly. There's so many shades, so many colors, so many hues, so many tints. It's too much. There's so many colors. Color is physical property of visible light that is one part of the larger electromagnetic spectrum, which also includes other like radiation, X-rays, and infrared light. Each color is differentiated from the others by its wavelength. The next design element is texture. I love texture. Who loves to use texture on design? Raise your hand. Texture. Who likes to use textures on fabrics, on the walls, on the ceiling, on the furniture? Tell me, I want to know. Texture is the surface quality of a material. It results from the inherent structure of the material or from the application of some type of coating over the material. Most people think of texture as the relative smoothness of roughness of a surface and associate certain textures with certain materials. Let me give you an example. Metal is smooth while brick is rough. Although every material has a specific texture, the perception of texture is closely tied to the texture's visual qualities. The relationship of the texture with the surrounding textures, the viewing distance, and the lighting. Altering any of these can affect the final perceived appearance of the material. Texture can either be actual or visual. So the actual texture is the physical quality that can be sensed by touch. So you touch it and you feel a texture. The smoothness of a polished marble, the roughness of concrete, or the fussiness of wool fabric. Visual texture is what people imagine a surface to be simply by looking at it and based on a memory of similar texture. So you see texture, but when you touch it, you don't feel anything. Texture might be affected by its relationship to nearby textures through scale relationships, viewing distances, the way a surface is lighted alters the apparent texture. Texture can be a powerful design tool if used properly, right? So that doesn't mean you're gonna have every single piece of fabric in your hotel or in your residential project or a school or commercial, any project with a pattern or with a texture, the wall with a texture, the ceiling with a texture, the floor with a texture. So be careful. You have to learn how to use it properly. Texture adds interest to a space, reinforces the design concept, helps differentiate objects and surfaces from each other, modulates light, and adds scale. The next design element is pattern. Pattern is the repetition of a decorative motif on a surface. And let me explain a little bit more. It is closely related to texture, but the individual elements of a pattern are usually discernible as individual items, whereas texture appears as an overall tone. However, if a pattern becomes very small or is viewed from a distance, it can blend into a visual texture, right? So the difference, a pattern can become a visual texture when seen from the far. Texture is also generally considered a two-dimensional quality of plane surfaces, while pattern can be a two-dimensional or linear composition. Pattern adds visual interest to a space, change the scale of a room, and reinforce the design concept. The last design element that I want to share with you guys today is light. And this is one of the most important as well. Light is a basic to interior design. Light is basic in interior design, and I'm emphasizing that sentence. It is how all the other aspects of the environment are seen and it strongly affects how space and objects are perceived. The same space can be made to take on many different appearances simply by changing how it is illuminated. So having a task lighting or having an accent lighting, ambient lighting can change the way you see the space. Good lighting is an art as well as science. So craft lighting, make sure you check them out because they know what they're doing, and they have all type of lighting for your spaces. Because light has both a physiological and emotional effect on people, it is simply not enough to provide a sufficient quantity of light. You also need to have quality lighting. And just to end the conversation about lighting, good lighting can set or enhance the mood of the interior space, give added interest to the visual environment, accent and emphasize objects and areas, de-emphasize undesirable areas or architectural fixtures, highlight surfaces and textures like when you're wall washing, enhance color, and affect spatial perception. In summary, all of these elements are very, very basic in interior design, in graphic design, for painters, for sculptors. This is like design 101 when you go to school. But sometimes, the time passes, we are 10 years, 5 years, 7 years into our careers, and we forget the basics. Sometimes we have to go back to the basics to understand that foundation and develop better design concepts.